Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Jackie. I'd heard a lot about this period in Jackie Kennedy's life and how strong she had been and how smart she had been right after her husband had died. And I think this period of time that this film's about really ends up defining her and defining her as a public figure and a historical figure. And it's probably, if you're going to pick any period, the most interesting period to make a movie about. There's a lot of ways you could do it, but I think mainly the direction by Pablo Larraín makes this film a bit more interesting than your standard kind of Oscar bait kind of biopic, which it certainly, is, but Pablo Larraín makes it a little more interesting than the standardness that this film could probably fall into. Now, certainly, it's mostly about the acting, like most Oscar bait kind of acting movies are, and that's fine, and it's fairly good at that in certain regards. In other regards, it doesn't work necessarily. A lot of films right now, I guess, Oscar season, and there's a lot of films about grief, but I think what this is mainly about is the polarization of not only going through the sudden death of having your husband's head explode all over you, but also being taken from this status you have, this status that you've worked very hard for, this husband that you've had, this family that you've had, and have it kind of all taken away from you in an instant. And suddenly she has to come up with a great funeral so he is not forgotten. Suddenly she has to do all these things to both honor her husband and make sure that he is remembered for the great man he is. Also figuring out what to do with herself, what to do with her children, what to do with her life, and all the craziness and probably surreal nature that she herself probably felt at the time. It's a kind of insane experience that she probably went through, and there's very few other people ever who've probably had to deal with that. In an American sense, probably only like 4, and sort of Nancy Reagan, but Reagan lives, so I don't count that. But very few people, and particularly how famous she was, how she has to deal with that, how she has to deal with that basically ending, all really at the same time. And I think what Pablo Larraín does is he really shows you how insane and how crazy and how mentally hard that whole experience really was. And I think if anything Jackie really accomplishes on a kind of form over function level of really showing you that this was probably really fucking hard for Jackie Kennedy. And I think that's what this film shows most. The legend that I had heard of everything she did to make sure that funeral was a certain way, to make sure her children were taken care of in a certain way, to make sure everything is done in this precise way. I haven't read many books on her or anything I've seen news clips and things like that, but this film I think really got to the person that we have all heard about and showed this to her and humanized her and showed how hard and crazy that time really was. And I think if you really think about that time and humanize the idea of all of that happening to you, Jackie makes a whole lot more sense than being just your standard acting Oscar bait kind of movie, which it also is, but it tries to do something more. And when it tries to do something more, I think that's actually kind of cool. In her last days, both as First Lady and her last days in the White House after the assassination of her husband, John F. Kennedy, in 1963, and focuses particularly on her interview in Life magazine with Theodore H. White, played by Billy Crudup, as she thinks back on the events that went over the funeral. She tries to figure out what to do with herself, what to do with her life, what to do with the White House, and what to do with the legacy of her husband and his presidency. One thing that Jackie kind of does in kind of a more postmodern way that both pop star and documentary now have done, and you might be surprised I'm talking about comedies, but I'm talking about the aesthetics of them. Jackie isn't very funny. It does the idea of this film was shot on 16mm. It's really trying to mimic the kind of style of film at the time, and that seems to be more of an idea now than, although they do the Forrest Gump thing of like putting her, well, I guess sort of the Forrest Gump thing of putting her in the famous like White House tour on CBS. That was a big thing for Jackie Kennedy to show off what she'd done for the White House, and she actually did a lot of bringing back a lot of historical artifacts and history to the White House that hadn't been there, which actually seems very cool what she did, particularly the Lincoln bedroom. I didn't know the full extent of it. I had heard of it, but it was kind of like let you appreciate what she really did as a First Lady. She really like helped like make the White House great. Pretty cool, the legacy that she left. And I think the fact that she was really pro that with the White House is a really amazing thing. But it combines this in a way that makes you feel like you're in the period, but not in a way that just them kind of mimicking it. It almost kind of humanizes it and puts you more in it in a way. They only have a few things where like Johnson's gonna have a victory with Vietnam or something lame like that. You know, they don't do like too many things. Like Mad Men only did that in the pilot where they'd be like, look at this typewriter, it's the newest technology. Aha, get it? Because it's not that time anymore. But they stay away from that. They stay more in the emotions of Natalie Portman's portrayal, which I actually like to a certain degree. I don't think it's exactly like an impression. I don't think it's as good as her performance in Black Swan, but it did surprise me because I haven't really seen her in a lot of things in a while. I think she does a very good performance as Jackie. I definitely was with her for most of it. The only thing that hurt it wasn't actually in the movie. It was the fact that I saw this at Alamo Drafthouse and they played Jackie Kennedy's actual White House tour before the movie. Since they recreate that and put her in the footage in the movie, it was kind of actually taking me out of it. I've noticed like the Alamo Drafthouse pre-shows do not help my enjoyment of the film. They make me hate it more. So I don't know if maybe someone who's older who experienced that might feel the same way, but we literally watched it like right before, so I don't know if that is a really great idea. I think she does very good at the emotion of it and the presence of it. I think a lot of people find it colder, but the whole portrayal of Jackie Kennedy was kind of the first media savvy first lady. Maybe not the first. I'm not as familiar with the previous first ladies, but I think she was the one who was very media savvy in the new television age and what that meant and how having them represented in the right way meant something. So I think the idea that you could say her performance is cold, I think it is in some ways a performance of a performance. And the idea that I don't know if we necessarily knew who quote unquote the real Jackie Kennedy was, or do we really know anyone really? You could go into that, but that'd be nonsense. But it gave Natalie Portman a great showcase for this. I mean, the whole poster is just her in a red background, and that's kind of like the center of the film and what most people would be talking about. And without her, this film wouldn't be what it is. I mean, regardless if you like the performance or not, it's so central to enjoying or understanding the film, you couldn't really read the film without talking about it. She does it in the kind of same way that Pablo Larraín is directing it. She's trying to show the person as best she can, and I think she does a very good job. I can understand all the Oscar hype and her continuing being the actress that she is, but I think I like it more when she plays a little more naturally. I don't think this works as well. This isn't the Natalie Portman I will probably remember. This isn't probably, in terms of her filmography, won't stand out to me as much. What Pablo Larraín does with this kind of a film, the jumping back and forth, so many of these ideas are going on, and if someone important dies, it almost feels surreal. Things feel like they're moving too fast. Ideas are kind of hitting you. You have a big impactful moment in your life, you'll notice that it just doesn't feel like anything's real. It feels like all these things are moving in this strange way. This film does that very well, and to kind of emphasize that, using the non-linear format really worked for it. Particularly the score by Mika Levy, who also did the score for Under the Skin, finds a way to get this away from the cheese factor that's often associated with this kind of a biopic. Makes it a lot more arty and strange. I think that might be some of the criticism about it. Her portrayal and how they wrote it, they make her seem more forceful, and clearly she's going to be forceful. Particularly that scene with Jack Valenti, which is really, I think, amazing and awesome. And that score emphasizes how crazy and surreal this whole thing is, and her just like not being able to sort of cope with what's going on. I mean, I think she was able to cope with it. Can you cope with death entirely? I don't know, but I think how she tries to deal with that situation, you will have those moments of not understanding, of just walking around with a glass of wine just wondering what the fuck am I gonna do. And I think that Mika Levy score just like played that in such a wonderful way. Without that score, I don't think this film would be what it is. It's one of those essential parts to it. This was almost directed by Darren Aronofsky, who produced it, and Rachel Weisz would have been Jackie, and Spielberg was gonna do it, and they're talking about doing a mini series with Spielberg and all this stuff, and this has been in development for a while, but I'm kind of glad it became what it was. And Pablo Larraín was managed to kind of orchestrate it in a way that feels very of her perspective. Although you get like very visceral version of the Kennedy assassination, no Zapruder film footage or anything. You just get like his head exploding all over her, and you get that moment and you see that intensification of it. I think if you live through something like that, it'd probably play in your head quite a bit, but I liked his restraint. He doesn't get into that until further on in the film, and I think that really plays well for it. Some of the things that don't work, I think, particularly is Peter Sarsgaard as Robert Kennedy never really worked for me. He works as a character and acting, but I never believed him as Robert Kennedy. He's like somebody else. He gets the attitude of it, and I know some people say that person doesn't look exactly like them, like Frank Langella in Frost Nixon. But I think the difference between Frank Langella and Frost Nixon is he kind of like meets you halfway, and the attitude pulls you over. It doesn't bother you. And I think with Peter Sarsgaard as Robert F. Kennedy, he kind of doesn't get you all the way there. And I think, Natalie Portman isn't exactly Jackie, but she pushes you further. And he would slightly do the Boston accent, but not really. It was very odd to me. Same with the John F. Kennedy guy, sort of looked like a little more him, but I almost wish he hadn't been in it. I don't like these kind of weird cameo things, don't seem to gel with me. It doesn't seem like they're done in a very good way, almost like Rogue One as well. I did particularly like John Hurt, was great. I was surprised, like John Hurt. Greta Gerwig, who I think we think of as more of a contemporary indie actress, really fit well into a period film, which says a lot about her as an actress, or her versatility, which I don't think any of us thought really that she had, or even thought about, to be honest, and it showed. She has a lot more range than we thought. And Billy Crudup, I think I haven't seen him in something in a little bit. I thought he did a very good job, almost kind of like maybe Moral Compass or the audience surrogate asking her the questions, or the public surrogate or something like that. I think this mostly does a lot better job than most like biopic Oscar films. They're mainly going for the prestige and things like that, but it's so artfully and well done, it kind of goes into that, but it's playing more to the art house crowd who might also like a prestige film. Because she's such a big figure and means so much to certain people will be put off by it because it's not the kind of presentation that they necessarily want. I don't really think that was inappropriate in what they were doing. I think they did a very good job with it. How they made Jackie was what made it so interesting and made it more of a biopic that is more about how it's made rather than just how it's acted. And I think that might be an odd mix for people, but I quite enjoyed that part of it. I don't think it's like an amazing movie. It's just kind of like, that's a very interesting way to do a kind of film that I don't think in the long run isn't as interesting. I think this will age a little better than like Saving Mr. Banks, and I think it was a lot more creatively done. And when you're looking at in the kind of scope of Oscar biopics under that genre, I think Jackie might be one of the more unique ones in a genre that we don't really talk about the uniqueness of. We just talk about how great the acting is, and the acting in it is good. I think there are a lot of elements in it that could have probably been done a little better. The strangeness to it I quite like, but I don't think it's an amazing artistic, necessarily amazing statement, but I do think it's a great statement on their interpretation of those days and their interpretation of that historical figure. And I think Jackie does what it probably needed to do as a movie, and I much probably prefer this than kind of some ultra prestige Jackie Kennedy movie, which I'm sure will be made in my lifetime, and I'm sure I probably won't like as much as this. And then we can talk about how this was way much better, and all the negative criticism will probably go away at that point, or people will like that one because they have less taste or something. Jackie is a semi-interesting idea for a biopic, and picking that time period and doing something with it, and kind of almost doing that meta way that's very in right now, and probably showing where we're going in postmodernism and filmmaking, and doing something interesting with the biopic to show one of our more prominent first ladies in America and show that kind of troubling time and how she made the legend of the Kennedys and Camelot and all of that. And I think it does that actually rather well, trying to kind of capture what her as a character and her as a person were trying to go through, or at least this interpretation, I think, presents it all in a very effective way. I think it's more effective than very memorable and amazing necessarily, but I think it was a much better shot than I could think anyone else doing. Jackie the movie will best be remembered as a more creative way to at least go about this sort of thing. It's just not one that I'm probably ever going to watch again. It's just one that I will complain about how much better it was when that next crappy one comes out in probably like 20 years or something. So if you have seen Jackie and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. Oh, and this is a little silly though, but my wife photoshopped this pretty cool Jackie poster of, instead of Jackie Kennedy, it's Jackie from Roseanne, which I'll now post up here, and I'll have a link below if you'd like to reblog that, because I think it's really funny and cool, and I think my wife did a really cool job. So I'll probably just have that up instead of this crap with the related videos. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.